This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with auditor Patty Arms about the benefits of ISO 50001.
Plus, kids, skateboards, manufacturing, and STEM education. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for April 18th, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Any of you who work for a company that makes or sells electronic equipment to the European Union are probably already familiar with RoHS, R-O-H-S. That's the EU directive for the reduction of hazardous substances. And notably, we're talking about lead, mercury, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, polybrominated biphenyls, and polybrominated diphenyl ethers.
Wow, good for you.
Pretty good, huh? Yeah.
Not bad.
Practiced.
Yeah.
Although RoHS has been in effect for about 11 years, since February 2003, it is only just now being applied to medical devices. Before then, medical devices were exempt. But as of July 22nd this year, most powered medical device equipment sold within the European Union must not contain more than the allowed quantities for each of the homogeneous materials that I just mentioned. So according to Grant Rameli in this week's article, Attention Medical Device Manufacturers, RoHS Affects You, RoHS may present a unique concern to the medical device industry because they are already under annual surveillance audits per the EU's medical device directive. So for those of you who aren't familiar, if you sell medical devices to the European Union, you are required to meet the requirements of a safety directive, essentially, which is the medical device directive. And that means you get an annual audit. So if the notified bodies, the ones who do medical device directive audits, are also activated to assess RoHS compliance at the same time, medical device companies are going to get a double whammy audit every year. This is actually something unique because this hasn't occurred yet. Right now, there hasn't been RoHS audits happening within companies that are also covered by a medical device directive. So, Rameli's message to medical device manufacturers is, get your house in order. So fortunately, there are a couple things working in the favor for medical device companies. First, since RoHS has been around for 11 years now, electronic suppliers who sell into the EU market are most likely going to be in compliance. So any components that go into medical devices are probably going to be okay already. Now, like we said, remember, this has been around for 11 years, and it's a very strict requirement in the European Union, or if you sell into the European Union. So most people who make electronic components already have been, making sure that everything's in order. So if a medical device company is buying from a supplier that already sells in the EU, odds are they're probably already compliant to RoHS. But this is the critical bit. RoHS is an absolute. You must not be in violation of the directive, even accidentally, or you risk serious legal consequences. Now, we've talked about this before. Remember, RoHS cares about who is the end seller of a product. It doesn't make any difference if, as an end seller, a medical device manufacturer, you bought components or subassemblies from somebody else. If those have more than the minimum requirement of these hazardous substances, you are the one, as a seller, that are liable, not your supplier. So, knowing that, because the accidents are going to happen, I mean, there's only so much a company can do to try to make sure that everything is in order in terms of hazardous substances. Some of the EU countries are giving you a little bit of leeway. And so what they're saying is regulators are going to take into account whether your company took all reasonable steps to avoid committing the offense. So, let's say they're audited and they found that they've gone over with whatever the minimum requirements are. They're going to want you to show due diligence. That is, can you show them that you have internal procedures for screening all parts of an electronic device against these restricted substances? If you're out of compliance, but you can show due diligence, you might avoid some penalties. So, obviously, first part of this, of your due diligence, is to look at the part supplier's own declarations of RoHS compliance. Are your suppliers already saying that they're compliant? Testing parts, if their origin is suspect, is another thing that you can do. So you're getting parts that a supplier is not RoHS compliant. Well, you might want to test those parts and make sure the parts you're putting into your product are within limits, and possibly replace your parts with a RoHS alternative if it is possible to make that kind of change. You can also petition for an exemption. So sometimes it's possible that the component or the product that you're making simply can't be made any other way. Well, the EU does allow for this if you can show them that there is no other alternative other than to use a banned substance. You can petition for an exemption, and according to Grant, you most likely, if you can prove your case, you most likely will get an exemption. So important deadline, July 22nd, if you are a medical device company selling into the EU. Make sure you are RoHS compliant, got your due diligence documents lined up.
Yeah, and it's another thing we've seen time and time again. It's about your supply chain and understanding where your supplies are coming from, who those suppliers are. We just did a story last week about suppliers in China and how you deal with that from a legal perspective. And as you said, I mean, you're responsible ultimately for what goes into your product. If it has your name on it and you're selling it in the market, you're the one that has to make sure that everything within that is compliant. So
absolutely.
Be aware again, July 22nd.
July 22nd.
The date, so check out that one. Okay. Another story that we covered this week that caught our eye comes to us from the International Organization for Standardization. And this one is pretty wild, Dirk.
This is a good one.
Literally, pretty wild. The African Safari.
Hey, that's wild.
There you go. A zoo in Puebla, Mexico was the first animal park to gain certification to ISO 9001 back in 2004. So for a decade now, African Safari has had a single language for process improvement used by management and staff. Bibian Pinto, chief of the quality department at African Safari, was interviewed in the May-June issue of ISO Focus magazine. Ms. Pinto had some perceptive things to say about the effect of ISO 9001 on her organization.
And by the way, I believe this was for their the scope of their ISO 9001 certification was for their visitor information, or their it wasn't for the operations. I think it had something to do with the actual
right. Well, it was for operations as well, but it had to do with visitor visitor information, I believe.
Yeah,
I think you're right on that. It was part of it. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the entirety of it though.
Okay.
But I think that the most interesting comment that Bibian Pinto made about ISO 9001 concerned the buy-in from the rank and file, and this is one I think we all can relate to. She said that the biggest challenge was to convince people that the system is there to work for them, not the other way around. And we've heard the same refrain time and time again from those who derive the greatest benefits from ISO 9001 or really any standard. Once the members of the team understand that the standard actually helps make their work processes easier, and in a sense easier, the momentum builds and the organization begins to really derive some great benefits from that standard, whatever that standard is. And again, I mean, whatever it is that you want to organize better through a standard like ISO 9001, if the team looks at it and says, that's a hassle, it's going to be more stuff I've got to deal with.
Right. They're not going to do it.
It's never going to go over.
Yeah.
You have to make them understand that, okay, yeah, there's going to be some upfront investment in this, but over the long haul, you're going to get the benefits out of that by making your work much, much simpler and much easier, much, much more clear. And I think that what's interesting to me about this is we're talking about a zoo here, an animal park, but the framework of ISO 9001 is flexible enough to help businesses anywhere, not only animal parks, but consumer goods, healthcare, city management, animal parks as well, of course, to improve what they're doing and better serve customers. And I think that's really the key thing, is the flexibility of a standard like ISO 9001. So for more information on the story, including the full interview with Bibian Pinto, not to mention the rest of the pieces that Dirk and I are going to be covering on today's show, be sure to check out the story links right below the video player screen, right down there.
That's right. Now, when we talk about just-in-time, a couple of ideas come to mind. First is the idea of suppliers giving you or delivering your components or sub-assemblies as you need them, so that you don't have a huge inventory of parts that are not currently needed for your processes. And you might also think of Kanban, which is a type of just-in-time. That's a pull system you guys are familiar with that requests parts only as they are needed on the production line. In both cases, the idea here is really to improve efficiency, reduce inventory, and a lot of those other lean ideals. But in his article, Just-in-Time Supports Inherently Safer Technology, Bill Levinson makes the case that there can also be a safety aspect. And in this case, he is talking about the chemical industry. You don't have to think back too far to remember some pretty high-profile chemical accidents over the past few years, which could have been avoided, according to Levinson and others, through the chemical industry's equivalent of just in time. And what he's talking about here is the creation of chemicals, particularly toxic chemicals, as they are needed for a step in a process, rather than storing these products in huge tanks and waiting for a catastrophe to happen. And one example he gives is the 2008 Bayer crop science explosion in West Virginia, which sent a huge pressure vessel rocketing through the insecticide manufacturing facility. This was really a catastrophic accident, and according to a U.S. chemical safety review, a slightly different trajectory of that vessel could have sent it into a tank of methyl isocyanate, also called MIC or MIC. MIC is the same stuff that killed 3,700 people in Bhopal, India in 1984 at another insecticide factory run by Union Carbide. I think a lot of us remember that. It was probably one of the I think it was called one of the greatest industrial accidents in history. 3,700 people killed, thousands and thousands more seriously injured and sickened by the release of MEC. Now, the thing about this is the Chemical Safety Board goes on to say that you can have MIC without having MIC, meaning that you can create methyl isocyanate where you need it inside the chemical reactor that makes the insecticide without having to store any substantial amount of MIC anywhere else. And Levinson goes over some other examples of how other toxic chemicals can also be made as they're needed rather than stored. And his whole point being is that not only that it is making chemicals at the point of use as needed a leaner, less wasteful methodology, but it's also one that most likely is going to cost companies less in the long term. As we've pointed out over and over again, lean isn't just about efficiency. As you drive waste out of a system, and part of waste is storage is waste, when you drive that out of the system, most of the time you are also going to reduce costs. Now, obviously, there's an upfront cost, which is why there is some resistance to doing this. Chemical companies have been used to buying chemicals, storing them, use it as they need it. If you're going to convert to an in-process manufacture of a chemical rather than storing it, you're going to have to revamp your factory. Nobody wants to spend money up front, so you almost have to make the return on investment justification for it. But in the end, you're going to get something that most likely not only costs less, but this is the kicker, particularly in the chemical industry, it is also safer. So I thought this was just kind of a really interesting use of just in time. And I never even realized that. I mean, once he pointed it out, it's like, well, sure, why not, if feasible, make the chemical, which, and by the way, what he's talking about is you making, most of these chemicals are being made from other chemicals that are safe or safer. Right. So you're creating a highly toxic chemical from other chemicals that are, or processes that are safer, but you're creating this toxic chemical only in the amounts and at the point that you need them. So inherently safer industry.
Yeah,
so.
a pull system basically for chemicals.
It's a pull system for chemicals, exactly.
Interesting stuff there. Well, thanks Dirk. Thanks Bill Levinson, of course, for a great story as always.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to turn now to another feature article. Taking the Heat Off the Bottom Line is the title of a feature article that we ran in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. This piece, which was written by Patty Arms of TÜV Rheinland, concerns ISO 50001 and addresses an issue of ever-increasing importance for today's organizations, regardless of their industry or location. Of course, we're talking about energy management and how companies can best husband these resources to improve organizational sustainability, produce goods at lower cost, and hopefully reduce their reliance on less efficient energy sources. So, this is a timely topic and one that certainly affects pretty much everyone in business today, a lot of you out there. So to dig in a little deeper on this topic, we're very pleased now to welcome Patty Arms to our show. Hello, Patty.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon, wherever everyone is across the world, this evening, whatever. Well, then, thanks for joining us. Let's dive right into it here. Many of us now are familiar with an environmental management system, the EMS, usually operated through ISO 14001, I think is the EMS most people use. What you're talking about here, though, is an energy management system using ISO 50001. So tell us how the two systems can complement each other and work together.
Well, they're actually very closely written. They're both built on the Plan, Do, Check, Act construct, and very similar. About 75% of the elements in ISO 14001 also are in 50001. So if you have a robust EMS, environmental management system, you will be able to be 75% of the way there in developing a 50,001. Some of the elements that are different are energy review, significant energy uses, and then they get into the design and procurement. But the common elements are your policy, legal and other requirements, your internal audit processes, document control, records management. Those things are all common and very, very closely written. I believe the 50,001 standard was intentionally set up to be very similar to 14,001.
So people that are already registered at 14,001 then would be able to look at this and work with a person such as yourself to figure out how to connect that to perhaps a registration to ISO 50,001.
Oh, sure. And also, in many cases, a lot of people have identified through their EMS, 14,001, energy consumption as a significant aspect. So they probably have a portion of that in place, and that will help them get the low-hanging fruit. What the 50,001 will do is, instead of looking at it just from an environmental impact standpoint, greenhouse gases, use of natural resources, they are looking, instead of managing risk, you're actually looking strictly at energy consumption. So it basically takes that significant aspect from your EMS and puts it on steroids and focuses exclusively on energy management. So that, yeah, they're very, very close, and you could definitely get a fast track if you have a good, robust EMS in place in order to get the energy management system going.
Well, let's talk sustainability. It's a big buzzword, of course, many of us talk about and hear about a lot, and it's interpreted in different ways by different people many times. But how is sustainability as a term defined and understood within the specific context of ISO 50001?
Well, yeah, a lot of sustainability definitely has been thrown about, one of the best buzzwords of this decade, I think. How I look at it is, you want to be able to sustain your business mission, whatever that may be, if it's producing products, over the long term. And you also want to be able to continue, continue to operate. So you want to look at how you are operating, and will that support sustaining your business mission? Will you remain competitive in the marketplace? Will you be able to continue to produce your goods and have the material and fiscal resources to do so? That's really what I mean about business sustainability, or using the term sustainable.
Yeah, Patty, you mentioned, I believe, that the standard can help organizations go beyond, I believe you said, the low-hanging fruit when it comes to an energy strategy. What are some of the bigger picture benefits that you're seeing in the marketplace?
Well, other than the obvious benefit of reducing greenhouse gases and all that from the environmental perspective, the biggest benefit really is from a business perspective, and that is saving through reducing energy costs, saving significantly many times on your bottom line, the cost of producing your goods. The utility bills in a manufacturing scenario, and this isn't just for manufacturing, but typically in industry, your utility bills are either your highest line item that you have, cost that you have, or the second, sometimes only second to all of your labor costs. And being able to save typically 6 to 25% of your energy costs over a 3-year period would be, you'd be a hero to be able to do that. So, you definitely would be able to stay sustainable in the marketplace by doing this.
And Patty, we have, it looks like your video is frozen, but we can hear you just fine, so we'll march forward here. The U.S. Department of Energy, as you mentioned in your piece, it's a big supporter of the ISO 50001 framework. Why is that? What is it that their data are showing about the results that come from registration to the standard?
Well, first, I think that they recognize that the ISO 50001 standard was developed by the leading experts. I believe there were about 60 in the energy management business, and they had their hand in it as well. But they also, through they've set up a program where you can get recognition, Superior Energy Performance, SEP. They do it for industry, they do it also for commercial. And in order to get the recognition, you must have a certified, to get a certified recognition, a certified ISO 50001 energy management system in place. That's at the certified level. They also have a recognition level where you have one in place, but you are self-certified in a sense. You self-declare. And what they found through this program, through the pilot parts of this program, is that the companies that were involved, and these are mostly industry, that were involved in these pilot projects have saved 6 to 25% of their energy costs within 3 years of implementation of a certified ISO 50001. I mean, this is, you know, the savings that they were able to record was about 90,000 to close to $1 million per year annually in savings. And this is significant and certainly would help you be sustainable in the marketplace.
No question about that. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I want to ask you one last quick question here. This is one that affects me and my household as well, so I'm always curious about it. The standard, specifics of the standard in terms of how it helps registrants to understand their projected energy consumption versus actual performance. How does the standard actually do that, help people do that?
Well, part of the standard requires you to set up energy performance indicators and to really take a look at the data that you get. How are you able to determine and quantify the impacts of your energy conservation initiatives or efforts? And so by doing that, you normalize your data in such a way that you are taking out of the equation any variances that are due to temperature fluctuations, production fluctuations, and then actually looking at what is your energy intensity? How much energy are you using per goods produced, per widget or whatever? And also with the internal audit process and external, if you're doing certification, there's an added layer of scrutiny that is on this data, and most companies are using this data, projected results, to be able to inform their investment decisions of what initiatives they're going to do. And, you know, being able to correlate more closely your projected versus your realized is going to help you get the next project funded as well, but also help you with a better return on investment calculation.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Patty. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today and telling us a little bit about ISO 50001. We'll look forward to chatting with you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, Patty. That's Patty Arms of Rhineland right there chatting with us today about ISO 50001.
There we go.
All righty.
You know, we talk a lot on this show about how important it is for companies, manufacturers in particular, to get involved with their local schools. I mean, that's really where the future talent is at, right? So invest some time in it. Well, along these lines, we ran a story this week by Mark Schmidt called Making the Kids Connection, the Tale of Kylan and the Magic Longboard. So there's a third grade class at Adams 12 STEM Launch School in Westminster, Colorado, that regularly invites a manufacturing CEO to come into the classroom to talk about manufacturing. It's part of a program called Kids Connection, which brings kids and industry leaders together to give them some hands-on learning in the classroom, a show and tell, right? And although the program is less than a year old, manufacturers are already queuing up for the chance to enthuse these young minds and inspire them about their future, right? So for instance, they recently had Chris Miser of Falcon UAV. Falcon UAV makes unmanned aircraft, UAVs. And he came to the classroom and he brought a UAV with him to fly around, right? Pretty cool. Kids love that. So he gets to talk about manufacturing, how these things are made and so forth. And he gets to show them something that's really cool. This is the kind of thing that really gets kids involved. But what's fascinating about this whole thing, about the Kids Connection program, is how it began. It kind of all started with an 8-year-old boy named Kylan. Kylan wanted to build a longboard skateboard. Now, if those of you who aren't familiar with what a longboard is, you've probably all seen skateboards. They're usually, 18 to 20 inches long. A longboard is 4 feet. It is a long skateboard. And they're kind of the cruiser equivalent of, you've seen bicycle cruisers. Well, these are cruisers, but for skateboards. And the idea was this was going to be a present for his grandfather, Papa Mike, who is a ARP card-carrying Army veteran who served with the 589th Engineer Battalion Mountain Movers in Vietnam. So naturally, Kylan wanted the longboard to be designed to have Papa Mike's military units insignia in the design. So he got all of his money together. He needed a few $100s. And he went to Coda Longboards to design and build the perfect present for Papa Mike. So first of all, understand that Coda, the employees at Coda include Army, Navy, Air Force, tactical aviation veterans, as well as graduates of the U.S. Navy Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun. They're veterans of tours in Iraq and Somalia. So in other words, the folks at Coda were all over making this project for a Vietnam vet. And I'm sure it helped that an 8-year-old kid came to the door as well. So they helped Kylan design and build the board. But they didn't just take his ideas and say, okay, we'll make this for you, come back in 3 weeks. They actually brought him in on the project. They showed him how the design was done on a computer. They talked to him about typography and design ideas. Then they actually let him help build the board. In short, they exposed him to a custom manufacturing project. Now you can imagine what kind of excitement this generated in this little 8-year-old kid, right? So he's all excited. So his mom, who happens to be involved with one of NIST's manufacturing extension partnerships, the MEP, arranged a show and tell at Kylan's school. Well, so Kylan went there, the folks from Coda came there, and obviously it was a hit. I mean, here are these people, they're showing off this really cool skateboard. Did we flip that sign up? Yeah, there it is. That's actually the skateboard design, 4 foot long, by the way. And I'm not sure you can see it really well, but there's all sorts of insignia from his crew in Vietnam, American flag down there. Very cool looking board. So this was obviously a hit. And that was where the seed for Kids Connection was planted and how it flourished. So all it took was something as simple as Coda, a local manufacturer, going into the school and kind of sharing what they do and sharing Kylan's excitement to get all these other kids' excitement. And then this program was launched, and now CEOs in the area are interested in coming in and showing off what their company does. It's a great idea. I love it.
It's great, and it'd be cool to go in a time machine and see Kylan in 20 years and see what he's doing.
Exactly.
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he was an engineer of some sort, or studying engineering or whatever.
And that's it's things like this which gets kids excited about STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math.
And and that's the age. The age when kids really begin to find their passions in life are in the single digits, right? Kids younger than 10, and an 8-year-old kid had an experience that we're talking about here, and
he's never going to forget.
No, and plants a seed again. So I think those types of stories are the ones that, if we're really going to honor, walk our talk about supporting STEM education and developing the next generation of engineers and quality professionals, that's the kind of stuff that we really need to be doing in schools, in elementary schools across the country. So really, really good story there by Mark Schmidt. And Mark is with the MEP, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership.
Exactly.
And he's promoting that. Always good work there from Mark, so thank you for that. All right, well, we're going to close today's show with a tweet of the week. And this one comes to us from Twitter user Regina Brett, who asks, and we're going to see it right now, how many people does it take to change the world? One. Just you, or me, or Dirk, or anybody.
The folks at Coda, or Kylan.
That's right.
That actually ties in really well with that last story. Is all it took was a kid getting a local manufacturer excited. They come in and they do a presentation in front of a grade school, and now this is something that's going to keep going.
That's right. It's good stuff.
Just takes one person.
Just takes one person to get it started. So to check out all of our tweets, all of our retweets, we retweet a lot of interesting information too. Just find us on Twitter at Quality Digest.
There you go. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks to Patty Arms from Tuve Ryland for coming in and talking to us a little bit about 50,001. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And we will see you next week.
See you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.
So long.
Bye.